61. Dolo Annual Peace Award winner. Inspiration is the most unreasonable thing. No one knows when it will spring up from some forgotten corner. It usually flashes by, elusive, but Kong Ming'an caught it. The problem was no longer simply how to strengthen Snow Empress enough to ward off every possible threat. It had become a question of supplementing the system and guiding its phased transformation. Elementalization had a certain plasticity. Combine elementalization with a spirit true body and find an anchor point to solidify it, and in essence the spirit master would transform from human into an elemental spirit beast. If chi blood transformation could be reverse engineered from a complete elementalization, then human-turned spirit beasts would no longer be limited to spell cultivators. Body cultivators could do it too. Body cultivators naturally matched many beast spirit masters. They used their spirit true body, shape their physique through chi blood transformation, and solidify it with an anchor point, allowing them to change into spirit beasts. The reverse was true as well. Many spirit beasts could adopt the body cultivator method to take human form without loss. The boundary between humans and spirit beasts would blur. Kong Ming'an murmured, expression complicated. The acquisition of spirit rings had already made human-spirit-beast relations irreconcilable. Humans lived short lives, iterated rapidly, and cultivated quickly. Spirit beasts lived long, iterated slowly, and cultivated slowly. Over time, spirit beasts were headed for extinction. But if the line between the two began to fade, if humans could become spirit beasts at will and spirit beasts could become human, everything would change. What do you mean I'm different from you? That's just my combat form. Bro, your spirit beast form is awesome. How do you transform? Teach me. I'll fight in my spirit beast form. Kong Ming'an could almost see it, fusion between the races, like the ethnic fusions of his previous life, eventually merging into one indistinguishable people after a few generations. He laughed softly to himself. He'd set out to strengthen Snow Empress and ended up thinking about systemic reform and, absurdly, world peace. If the Duluo plane had a Nobel Prize, he suspected he could win a Peace Prize. He forced his thoughts back to the task. If this method were promoted and nudged in the right direction, the odds of success were high. Solve the spirit ring and spirit bone acquisition problems, implement a continent-wide policy, and complete human-spirit-beast fusion would be practicable. For Kong Ming'an, finding new ways to obtain spirit rings and spirit bones wasn't impossible. Based on his research, shaping blank spirit rings from pure origin energy could be done. Spirit bones could be studied, buy some as raw material, research their principles, and eventually deduce a method for artificial spirit bones. In short, he could, if he wanted, settle the conflict and make the two races merge. But he didn't need to. He was human. Apart from Snow Empress and the spirit beasts of the land of extreme north he had promised to protect, he didn't care if other spirit beasts died. He wasn't a philanthropist. Why bother when he had other goals? The immediate priority was to finish the full version of elementalization, perfect the spell cultivator side of the system, and then continue deducing from that foundation. Once those pieces were in place, Snow Empress's spirit ring problem would be easy to solve. He checked his calculations. Snow Empress needed time to recover. Her origin hadn't fully healed. That window should be enough to finish elementalization. He felt like a researcher coming back to the lab after a 10-day vacation, refreshed, eager, and oddly fulfilled. The blue, flowing light in his eyes sharpened. Kong Ming'an stood and let his spirit power rise, wrapping around him. He stepped onto the cold spring of the ice and fire yin-yang well. The bone-chilling coldness there was merely condensed heaven and earth origin chi, a form of energy. Ordinary people who absorbed it couldn't convert it quickly into spirit power. It would corrode their bodies, freeze their meridians and dantian, and cause severe injury. For Kong Ming'an, it was no problem. His body began to change. Flesh and blood took on the brilliance of elements. His face shimmered with a faint elemental glow, dreamlike and ethereal. He walked across the cold spring and soon reached Snow Empress. She paused in her healing, opened her eyes, and a trace of doubt flickered in her ice-blue pupils. "It's fine. Keep healing. I'll take the measurements," Kong Ming'an said, waving her off. With the cold spring's extreme energy flowing through her, Snow Empress's own energy structure became clearer to him. He wouldn't waste the chance to observe. Snow Empress tilted her head, puzzled but not resisting. After a brief hesitation, she stepped closer and, to his surprise, gently embraced him. Kong Ming'an was caught off guard. Snow Empress. This way it'll be clearer, won't it? She replied softly, her breath warm against his ear as her spirit power surged, actively merging with his. Even without lowering his gaze, everything belonging to Snow Empress was laid bare in his mind, complete and crystal clear. The cold yet extraordinarily soft aura enveloped him. The blue flow in Kong Ming'an's eyes paused. After a long moment, he closed his eyes and answered knowingly, In the distance, Tangya had just finished marking the planting area. She watched the two figures embracing through the white mist rising from the cold spring and, unconsciously, pouted. They really don't mind being seen at all. She chewed on a life-type blue-silver grass and found its taste unusually sour today. 62. Finals Day. More than half a month passed. Above the ice and fire yin-yang well's cold spring, the milky white mist that had hung there finally thinned and drifted away. As the vapor cleared, two figures emerged. Both who had been entwined woke almost at the same moment. Kong Ming'an didn't open his eyes right away. His mind was still busy sorting through the flood of interwoven thoughts and insights from the long observation. When he did finally let out a soft sigh, a wave of fatigue followed, an after effect, he realized, of being locked in a flow state for so many sleepless days. The weariness was uncomfortable but manageable. He opened his eyes, the faint blue glow in them ebbed. He paused, looked up, and met the Snow Empress's icy blue gaze. For a moment he was stunned, then recovered his composure. Calmly, he said, "Snow Empress?" She broke the embrace and drew back a little. The soft, freezing pressure left him, and he could breathe again. He asked the question on his mind. "How is your recovery?" "The spring works well," she said, crisp and cold as ever. "A few more treatments and I'll be fine." Her voice showed no change, but recovery was not instant. Her transformation had been forcibly interrupted, and she had been sealed. While that hadn't further damaged her origin, she could not be fully healed in just over half a month. Kong Ming'an understood and did not press. He cast his gaze down at the spring. Its extreme cold had lessened from before. Its reserves were not endless. Yet he also felt the well's energy slowly regenerating as the ice and fire balanced. The yin-yang well's structure was remarkable, but for now his focus stayed on the Snow Empress's elemental recovery. After greeting Tangya, who was tending to some plants, Kong Ming'an pulled free the gray door and stepped through it with the Snow Empress close behind. 2 of the 3 tasks in Heaven Soul Empire were done. The last remained, the finals of the Advanced Spirit Master Academy Soul Fighting Grand Competition in Heaven Do City. The sky that day was clear. In the vast circular arena, the crowd roared, the atmosphere taut with excitement. After rounds of fierce competition, the final 2 teams were the continent's longtime rivals, Shrek Academy, a name synonymous with invincibility, and Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy, the pinnacle of spirit tool mastery. In Shrek's rest area, the mood was solemn. Zhang Lexuan sat on the bench in dark purple, a black inner top accentuating her figure. Her hands rested on her legs. At times her gaze drifted toward the sun-moon side opposite, sweeping over every member as if looking for someone. For days, she'd felt unsettled by a certain young man, and since he had suddenly withdrawn from the competition, she'd been thinking of him more and more. Her thoughts paused on a stray memory, the young man's sudden parting words that day. "Go, home?" She repeated the phrase softly, then stiffened at herself. Shrek was her home. She would never leave. Reassured by the repetition, she rubbed her temples and tried to settle herself. A gentle voice at her side interrupted the ruminations. "Lexuan, Elder Xuan and teacher want to confirm the final lineup and tactics." She turned to see Han Roro and Wu Ming approaching. Han Roro's expression was still the usual watery gentleness. Wu Ming's eyes glittered with fighting intent. Zhang Lexuan forced a nod. The 3 walked over to the team leader and settled into the last briefing. "This format is the same as before," the teacher said. "Individual matches, 2-2-3 small team rounds, and then the full team battle. I won't go into every detail. You've trained for days and should know the plans. For the first match, the individual, Wu Ming will go on first. You must get us the opening victory." "Don't worry, teacher. Wu Ming said with a bright grin, clenching her fist. A faint golden flame aura flickered about her. Her golden crow spirit made her formidable in one-on-one fights. Beside her, Zhang Lexuan relaxed slightly. She trusted her friend's strength. After confirming the order, they returned to the rest area to prepare. Zhang Lexuan slid back into her seat and, almost without thinking, looked across the way again. Her pupils suddenly tightened. A figure had stepped out of the sun-moon shadows, a lone young man in moon-white casual clothes. His black hair was neatly kept. A faint smile softened his handsome face. He looked up and their eyes met. He offered a polite smile. The sight jolted Zhang Lexuan. A phantom of unease spiked through her. She moved to warn Wu Ming, who was already tensing to step out, but the announcer's voice boomed over the arena speakers. Finals. First match. Individual contest. Both competitors, please take the stage. Wu Ming could not wait. Golden light flashed as she leapt onto the central platform amid the crowd's roar. Zhang Lexuan's heart raced as she glanced across and saw the young man incline his head slightly, then take a single step. His figure flickered, and before she could fully process it, he had silently appeared on the opposite side of the stage. Kong Ming'an had joined the match in person. 63. Wu Ming, the stubborn one. When Kong Ming'an suddenly appeared on the competition stage, the arena fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into even louder cheers and shouts. One person defeating an entire team was far more exciting than an ordinary one-on-one match. Everyone had assumed the young man wouldn't show, and yet here he was, in the finals. Yes! I want to see a bloodbath, someone shouted. On the stage, Wu Ming, who had been preparing to perform, froze for a moment. She frowned as she looked at the young man who had been chatting with them earlier. She didn't underestimate him because of his age. She and Zhang Lexuan had watched his previous match the day after their conversation. His power was immense, but his methods were inscrutable. The casual expression on her face slipped away, replaced by a tight, serious line between her brows. Without hesitation, scorching golden flames burst from her body. The heat alone made the arena's protective barrier shiver. 5 spirit rings, perfectly configured, 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 1 black, rose from beneath her feet, a clear display of her cultivation as a 59th level spirit king. A brilliant golden crow apparition spread its wings behind her. She tapped her toes and lifted off, looking down at her opponent with a sacred, searing aura. Kong Ming'an remained motionless below. The referee hovered in the air. After confirming both were ready, he called out, "The match begins." No sooner had his voice fallen than Wu Ming struck. The golden crow wings on her back beat fiercely, lifting her rapidly higher. She knew her advantage: agile aerial movement and devastating fire bombardment, typical strengths for Spirit Masters fighting ground targets. She looked down and saw that Kong Ming'an did not pursue. Instead, a thick, blood-red mist bled out from around him, rolling like a living thing. It engulfed his form completely, leaving only an unsettling crimson haze about 10 meters in radius. Putting on an act, Wu Ming snorted, though she remained on guard. She raised a hand. Her first spirit ring flared. Golden Crow True Fire Blast! Several blazing golden fireballs fell like meteors toward the blood mist, but there was no expected explosion or shock. The fireballs vanished into the mist as if swallowed by the sea, leaving no ripple. Wu Ming's brow tightened. It wasn't that her attacks were being simply blocked. They were losing coherence, being absorbed. Golden Crow True Fire Explosion, she snapped, igniting her third spirit ring. She unleashed a wider, sustained burst of flame. A golden tide surged into the crimson fog, but the result was the same. It was quietly swallowed without effect. She felt uneasy. This opponent's technique was bizarre, and she couldn't grasp its nature. Before she could think further, a crimson spear condensed from chi and blood tore through the mist and shot out with terrifying speed, striking at the gap in her thoughts. There was no time to dodge. Fourth spirit ability, Golden Crow True Fire Ring. Her fourth ring flashed purple, forming a condensed golden fire ring before her for defense. Boom, the blood chi spear slammed into the ring with a dull, crushing sound. The ring shuddered and barely held, then shattered. At the moment of impact, Wu Ming felt a brief, sharp disruption in her spirit power circulation, as if something had interfered with her control of her own abilities. More spears followed like lightning, slicing out from different angles through the mist and sealing off every escape. Wu Ming gritted her teeth, golden flames erupting around her as she dodged and wove, desperately activating her spirit abilities to defend. She managed to shatter most of the spears, but one slipped through a gap and struck her lower abdomen. "Ah!" she choked, though the expected sharp pain never fully arrived. When the spear contacted her body, it seemed to dissolve into a rush of crimson energy that surged directly into her meridians. Her face drained of color as her center of balance staggered. The circulation of spirit power in her body slammed against an invisible barrier. Her normally open meridians were forcibly blocked by scorching, stagnating energy. Spirit power lost its flow and crashed chaotically, producing a bloating, suffocating pressure that nearly made her retch. She tried to force her will through. Fifth spirit ability, Golden Crow. But her meridians were heavily constricted. Spirit power refused to condense smoothly. Even abilities she could normally summon in an instant became agonizingly difficult. Before she could complete the activation, another blood chi spear struck her shoulder, injecting more corrupt energy and intensifying the blockage. Her Golden Crow spirit manifestation was forcibly dispelled. With a scream, she fell like a bird with broken wings, plunging headfirst into the churning crimson fog. The moment she entered the mist, suffocation seized her. The air felt replaced by dense, unyielding, scalding chi and blood that pressed against her skin and tried to force its way into her body through every pore. Her meridians clogged entirely. Her spirit power was sealed and could not move. It felt like being held under a pool of viscous blood, unable to struggle, helplessness spreading like a cold tide. Panic flared. Am I going to die? Tears welled as primal fear and despair rose like a physical weight. Death did not come. Instead, she fell into arms that were narrow but uncommonly steady. The suffocating pressure eased slightly. Blurred, she forced her eyes open and met the young man's face, impossibly close. His black eyes were calm, unruffled. Her heart seemed to freeze. "Do you surrender?" His voice was clear and cold, without mockery or triumph. Just a quiet question. Humiliation swept through her like a flame. Fear and despair transformed into stubborn pride. She grit her teeth and spat the only answer she could not keep down. "Never." Kong Ming'an said nothing to Wu Ming's stubbornness. He only thought for a moment. "Ugh." Wu Ming immediately felt the surge of vital energy and blood in her body spike. That terrifying sensation of her spiritual power being locked down, the feeling of being about to be drowned alive, hit her again, even stronger than before. Immense fear and despair tore through her defenses. I surrender! I surrender!" Using the last of her strength, she stammered the words, a sob catching in her voice. The suffocating pressure ebbed away like a tide the moment she spoke. Her meridians were still blocked and uncomfortable, but at least she could breathe. Wu Ming's face was flushed. She slumped into Kong Ming'an's arms, her clothes soaked with cold sweat and gasping for air. The bloody mist that had shrouded the arena began to dissipate, revealing Kong Ming'an standing calmly at the center and Wu Ming near exhaustion in his arms. The referee stared for a moment before announcing loudly, "First match of the individual competition. Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy wins." There was a brief hush, then the venue erupted into deafening cheers. Kong Ming'an's expression remained calm as he released his hold. Wu Ming staggered and only managed to steady herself with his supporting hand. Her legs felt like jelly. Her spiritual power seemed to have solidified inside her meridians, completely unusable. She had never experienced anything like it. Even simple control over her body felt foreign. After a few moments, her body adjusted to the strange sensation. She shot Kong Ming'an a complicated look, then bowed her head and left the stage, dejected. Kong Ming'an stayed to await his next opponent. What had he done? Very simply, he had used highly condensed vital energy and blood to forcibly invade the opponent's body, disrupting the circulation channels of their spiritual power and effectively sealing them. Because he coordinated the outward use of his chi and blood with his spirit power and will, the same technique could attack materialized spirit abilities and destroy their energy structures, a kind of spell-breaking effect. When he condensed his chi and blood into a mist and spread it out, it functioned like the unfolding of a domain. Though crude and nascent, it was essentially a blood chi domain, unique to body cultivators. Inside that blood chi domain, the use of spirit abilities became difficult. Non-body spirit masters who entered it would have their bodies corroded by the chi and blood, producing a more thorough sealing of their spiritual power than mere materialized attacks could achieve. Kong Ming'an found it odd that research into applying chi and blood seemed to be developing specifically to counter spell cultivators, but he set the thought aside. Regardless of the theory, the technique was devastating against conventional spirit masters. The domain was crude, just a bloody mist with a 10-meter radius, and his short reach would be a liability off the competition stage. Yet in the current setting, that limitation became an asset. Mechanical restraint had its own beauty. Who said body cultivators only had raw stats and no mechanics? Back in the Shrek team's resting area, everyone surrounded the pale-faced Wu Ming. "Wu Ming, are you hurt?" Han Ruoro asked anxiously. Wu Ming shook her head. Her voice was hoarse, all the confident pride gone. Her eyes were unfocused, and she seemed oddly broken. No physical injuries, but my spiritual power, I can't use it. My meridians feel blocked. Aside from the physical attributes of a spirit king, I'm almost an ordinary person now. I don't think I can continue in the next matches. The team's expressions turned grave. Zhang Lexuan felt his heart drop. His worst fear had come true. The opponent's strange ability was a nightmare for spirit masters. The team leader's face went ashen. After a moment, he glanced toward Elder Xuan, who had been watching from behind. "Elder Xuan, did you determine what method the opponent used?" the team leader asked. Elder Xuan remained silent for a long time, staring at the distant stage. A flicker of apprehension crossed his face, but he dared not voice it. Finally, he shook his head. "Unknown." The team leader bit back his frustration. He replayed Wu Ming's fight in his mind, hesitated, then spoke in a steady voice. "His interference with spiritual circulation seems linked to that bloody mist and his attack methods. Li Yi, you're up next." "Your Azure Wind Falcon spirit is the fastest on the team," the leader continued. "You excel at long-range hit-and-run and cutting attacks, and you control wind elements. Maybe you can disrupt his mist and find an opening." Li Yi, a lean, sharp-eyed spirit king whose role was agility and assault, nodded and stepped onto the stage carrying the team's hopes. He returned to the resting area far quicker than anyone expected, face pale. He reported that his spiritual power had been rendered unusable, and he couldn't continue either. Li Yi had indeed been fast, but the bloody mist opposite had shown the ability to shift at will and follow the opponent's main body. The young man's terrifying physical qualities had mattered most. Without using any spiritual power, a single sprint closed the distance, followed by the throwing of a blood-red spear to restrict movement and the casting of blood-red chains that dragged Li Yi into the mist. The match ended decisively. A heavy silence fell over the Shrek area. Losing 2 matches was one thing. If the opponent was simply stronger, they could accept it. But 2 Spirit Kings in a row losing the ability to continue fighting was beyond anything they had prepared for. Han Ruoro suddenly stood up, determination in her eyes. "Teacher, let me go in the next round." "You," the team leader hesitated, conflicted. "Your control system abilities are powerful, Ruoro, but the opponent's power seems to—" "I'm only going to probe," Han Ruoro interrupted calmly. "We need to learn the limits and principles of his ability, or we'll be even more passive in the upcoming 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and team matches. I'll be careful. If I can't, I'll surrender immediately and won't force myself to affect the later rounds." The team leader looked at her resolute face, then at the downcast team members, and finally gave a heavy nod. "Be careful." Han Ruoro acknowledged him and walked onto the stage with steady, resolute eyes. 65. Defeat Han Ruoro climbed the competition stage slowly. Her posture was graceful, her manners as gentle as water, but her usually soft eyes were unusually solemn. She stood still, drew a deep breath, and a soft, golden light welled up from within her, forming into a seemingly pliant yet incredibly tough golden rope that moved around her like a living thing, her spirit, the shaking gold rope. 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 2 black rings, 6 perfectly matched spirit rings, rose from beneath her feet. A Spirit Emperor aura radiated outward, drawing audible gasps from the stands. A combatant at the Spirit Emperor level promised to make the match far more exciting. Her her gaze immediately fixed on Kong Ming'an across from her. Blood mist drifted from his body. He reached out, and the mist began to converge and condense until a massive, heavy crimson spear formed, planted beside him. He raised his hand again, and a blood-red longsword, crystalline like coagulated blood, manifested in his grip. Several blood chi chains, almost tangible, coiled and danced around him. Han Roro's eyes landed on those chains. Their posture felt eerily familiar, almost like her shaking gold rope. Unease prickled at her. Was he copying her? If so, his ability to learn and imitate was terrifying. The referee confirmed both were ready, raised his hand, then brought it down sharply. The match begins. Kong Ming'an moved the instant the words fell. He grabbed the spear and hurled it at Han Roro with a howl that sliced the air. She tapped her foot and floated back and aside like a drifting willow catkin, narrowly avoiding the spear. She began to create distance, using the advantage of being a control system spirit master. But after throwing the spear, he did not hide in the blood mist as before. Instead, he leapt onto the spear that had lodged behind him. The shaft bent, then he shot forward, closing for close combat. Han Roro was not careless. Her fourth spirit ring flared, and the shaking gold rope snaked out like a golden serpent, attempting to bind Kong Ming'an and restrict him. At that moment, the blood chi chains coiling around Kong Ming'an also moved. They seemed to come alive, matching the shaking gold rope's speed and flexibility and aiming directly at Han Roro's spirit. He was really imitating me. Han Roro's eyes hardened. His manipulation of the chains was far more refined than in his earlier matches. Had she been treated as practice? She frowned, and her fifth spirit ring burst into light. She intended to use a stronger control technique to block the incoming chains. But when the shaking gold rope tangled with the chains, they seemed to heed a command. Abruptly, they abandoned their attack on her, and instead wrapped themselves around her spirit, even faster and tighter. His target is my spirit. A sudden, nauseating stagnation spread through her spirit. It felt as if a slick film had coated the connection between her and the shaking gold rope. Spirit power flowed with difficulty, and the rope's movements sluggishly lagged. His strange ability affected not only a spirit master's body and spirit power, but the spirit itself. Then an enormous, irresistible tug came from the rope. Kong Ming'an's chains had tightened around her spirit and yanked it back. Han Roro cried out as her body lurched forward. Before she could fully react, Kong Ming'an pushed off the ground. The earth trembled, and his body shot forward like an arrow. He closed several dozen meters in an instant. For a moment, everything blurred, and his calm, handsome face was suddenly within reach. The tip of the blood chi longsword, radiating a chilling lethality, was aimed at her heart. The cold touch and the threat froze her blood. Thought stopped. "I surrender!" The words burst from Han Roro before she had time to think, her voice trembling. The sword's tip halted, and the oppressive stagnation in her spirit stopped intensifying. It still lingered, maybe 70% of its original effect, but it no longer tightened toward death. Relief flooded her. She had escaped the killing blow. She sucked in a breath and looked up into Kong Ming'an's calm, unreadable black eyes. For an instant, she thought she saw a flicker of helplessness and regret, as if he regretted she had surrendered so quickly and deprived him of completing whatever test he had been conducting. At least he had followed the competition rules, she thought, which offered some small comfort. Still, a heavy sense of powerlessness settled over her. She had no idea how to counter that strange ability. Retracting the now dim shaking gold rope, she inclined her head to Kong Ming'an. Her voice was dry when she spoke. "Thank you for showing mercy." Then she turned and walked down the stage, each step a little heavier than the last. Shrek's team leader confirmed with the referee that Shrek conceded the individual match. The Sun Moon team had won. The atmosphere in Shrek's resting area was oppressive. Han Roro sat there, face pale but composed, gathering her spirits and quickly recounting what had happened. She stressed that the opponent's ability could affect spirits directly and that his rate of learning and adaptation was terrifying. Faces around her grew grimmer and grimmer. Any last hope for a lucky break was gone. They had lost all 3 individual matches. The longest had not even lasted 3 minutes, each one a rapid, humiliating defeat the team had never experienced in the tournament. The easy confidence born of past victories evaporated, replaced by mounting pressure and confusion. Their team leader's expression was grave. He had expected Shrek to defend its championship as in previous years, to carry on its glory. Now he dreaded what might come next. He could already picture returning home and having to answer for a failure like this. Chapter 66, The Dual Cultivation of Body and Spell, is the real answer for this version. After taking several deep breaths, the team leader finally calmed himself. With a hoarse voice, he confirmed the hard fact. We lost the individual competition. Next is the 2-2-3 battle. Everyone, give it everything you've got. His gaze swept over the team. Among the primary fighters, Wu Ming and the Spirit King bonded to the Azure Windfalcon had their spirit power sealed and were completely out of action. Han Roro had been affected too, but she could still fight. She counted as a Spirit Emperor-level combatant. Beyond them, there were only Zhang Lexuan, 3 other main team members, and 7 Spirit Ancestors from the reserves. That lineup wasn't weak, but Sun Moon's roster was luxurious. Their main team included 2 Spirit Emperors, 5 Spirit Kings, and that unfathomable young man who had yet to reveal his spirit ring or spirit and had been fighting with methods nobody could read. It was a clear disadvantage. How could they possibly win? The team leader closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and made a decision. The hard power gap was huge, and the enemy had strange abilities that they couldn't break. There was only one option left: gamble. After a short intermission, the second round of the Spirit Master Finals began, the first match of the 2-2-3 battle strategy. As both teams' members took their positions in the arena, the crowd erupted. Shrek Academy sent out 2 Spirit Ancestors from the reserve team. Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineering Academy sent out 2 genuine Spirit Emperors. Is Shrek giving up? 2 Spirit Ancestors against 2 Spirit Emperors? That's suicide. Shouts and speculation rose from the stands, and some Shrek supporters tried to spin it into a clever tactic. But in Shrek's rest area, the team leader's expression was tight and grave rather than pleased. Trading 2 Spirit Ancestors to take down 2 Spirit Emperors might be acceptable. What he really wanted was to absorb that unfathomable young man. And the opponent's decision to start with 2 Spirit Emperors made their intent clear. They wanted this round sealed. If they were willing to commit 2 Emperors now, they must be confident of winning one of the other matches outright. Coupled with the young man's earlier performance, the leader's worry hardened. They weren't trying to give Shrek a chance. They intended to crush Shrek's honor as cleanly and quickly as possible. His suspicion proved true. The first match of the 2-2-3 finished seconds later with Shrek defeated. Immediately, the arena's Soul Guide projection listed the lineup for the second match. Shrek Academy sent out Zhang Lexuan and a support role Spirit King. Sun Moon sent Kong Ming'an and a support role Spirit King. The team leader's heart leaped into his throat. Win or lose, everything now depended on this single match. Zhang Lexuan stepped onto the stage. Tall and graceful, her dark battlesuit emphasized her lines and curves. Her usually cool, clear eyes were now hard with iron resolve. Scanning the arena, her gaze settled on the conspicuous figure opposite her. Her expression was layered and complicated. She had never expected things to come this far. At first, she'd thought of the opponent as little more than a handsome younger brother. Who could have guessed that a few months and a handful of wins would push Shrek into a desperate position, to the point where they were running out of fighters? After a beat, she addressed the young man directly. Can Wu Ming and the others recover? Don't worry, Sister Lexuan. I only temporarily sealed their spirit power. Once the competition ends, I'll release them. There won't be any after effects. Kong Ming'an smiled, expression unreadable. For some reason, his words rang true in Zhang's ears. She found herself believing him without hesitation and felt a small measure of relief. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. All the confusion and distraction had vanished. Only pure, resolute battle intent remained. No matter how grim Shrek's situation, her stance was unchanged. She would fight for Shrek. Winning this match was her duty. She wouldn't hold back. Buzz, 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 2 black spirit rings rose from beneath her feet. The spirit power fluctuations were dense and oppressive, far stronger than Han Roro's had been. It was a cultivation level right on the cusp of the spirit saint realm. Kong Ming'an met Zhang Lexuan's full commitment with an unchanged smile. From beneath his feet, a deep black 10,000-year spirit ring, as if it swallowed light, slowly materialized and revolved around him. He had no intention of underestimating his nominal clan sister. He wielded a top-tier moon spirit, an apex spirit emperor at level 69, and practical combat experience from countless missions. Even if a body cultivator traditionally had advantages over a pure spirit master, relying solely on physical cultivation against her would be risky. But Kong Ming'an wasn't just a body cultivator, he was also a spell cultivator. That combination, physical cultivation's raw stats plus the mechanics of spellcraft, was the real solution to this matchup. What mattered wasn't choosing the body cultivator version or the spell cultivator version. No matter which way you looked at it, dual cultivation of body and spell was always top tier. The 10,000-year ring drew the arena's attention instantly. This was the first time Kong Ming'an had revealed his spirit ring in competition. Zhang Lexuan's pupils narrowed as she fixed her gaze on the black ring. Her vigilance shot up and she made a quick assessment. A 10,000-year ring as a first ring suggested he might have twin spirits. If he could bear a 10,000-year ring, his physical constitution, mental force, and cultivation level had to be at least Spirit King. On top of that, there were at least 5 unknown spirit abilities yet to be revealed, and the strange technique earlier that could seal a person's spirit power and spirit. The look on Zhang Lexuan's face solidified. Her clan brother was more than troublesome. He was extremely dangerous. The referee hovered between them, scanning to confirm both sides were ready. He inhaled and then announced loudly, 2-2-3. Battle strategy, second match, begin. Ping-er. Zhang Lexuan let out a low cry. The timid-looking girl beside her immediately answered. A green light flickered in her palm and 5 green apples, faintly fragrant, materialized and were handed to Zhang Lexuan. This was her spirit, green apple. As a food system spirit master, Ping-er could grant incredibly powerful single-target buffs. Zhang Lexuan took the apples without hesitation and bit into them one after another. The sourness made her frown reflexively, but the next instant a surge of power rushed through her. Spirit power, speed, strength, mental clarity, and life regeneration, all 5 attributes swelled. Each buff increased by a substantial 40 to 50%. A support spirit master strong enough to be on the Shrek main team left no doubt. She flicked her eyes at Ping-er. The girl understood and bit into the speed apple. Then, holding the remaining ones, Ping-er dashed to the edge of the stage and took up an invincible shield, ready to use it. On the opposing side, Fang Yi, Sun Moon Team's support spirit king, had also finished her preparation. She, too, was a food system spirit master and cradled a pile of bread. Zhang Lexuan's gaze fixed on Kong Ming'an without hesitation. Behind her, a cold moon shadow suddenly coalesced. Countless bright moon-white blades of light poured out like a storm, sweeping across half the arena. Having seen his strange chi and blood sealing ability, she chose the simplest, most brutal response, indiscriminate area bombardment to keep him from getting close. Kong Ming'an did not panic. He finished the last bite of bread in his mouth, then scooped up Fang Yi beside him and tossed her into a spatial ripple that had opened at his side, sending her to the edge of the stage. He then raised a hand with measured calm. An invisible, space-warping barrier silently unfolded before him, covering half the arena. The howling moon blades that struck it vanished as if a strong animal had plunged into deep water, gone without a trace. Zhang Lexuan's eyes narrowed. Instinct told her something was wrong. Behind her, the space she thought cleared stirred, and the blades that had vanished suddenly shot out from the ripples behind her, intact. She reacted instantly, her form dissolving into a hazy moon essence to narrowly avoid the barrage, and landed gracefully at a distance. Space spirit. She grew more serious. His second spirit was a space spirit, an ability as rare as the ultimate attributes. His strange blood mist had been troublesome enough. Now this extraordinary spatial talent as well? She had to finish this quickly. She could not give him room to maneuver. Zhang Lexuan's eyes flared. The 5th and 6th 10,000-year spirit rings on her body flared simultaneously. 6th spirit ability, Moonrise. 5th spirit ability, Moonfall. Moonrise amplified her power, intensifying the moon essence that clung to her and swelling her aura. At the same time, a massive orb of light, like a falling moon, descended with destructive force toward Kong Ming'an. Moonfall, her pure offensive ability. Kong Ming'an's eyes stayed calm. He condensed a crimson chi and blood spear in his hand, but this time its tail was linked to a visible chain of chi and blood. He drew a breath, focused his mind, and then threw it. The ground around his feet cracked like a spiderweb. The spear flew, not toward the moon glow, but directly for Zhang Lexuan. She shifted slightly, letting it graze her waist, yet the spear plunged into a spatial ripple behind her and vanished. In the next instant, it reappeared through another ripple not far ahead and continued its stabbing arc. Zhang Lexuan barely dodged. The spear's tip nearly nicked her neck, sending a chill along her spine. Her pupils constricted. One subtle spatial ripple after another erupted around her, as if by some impossible choreography. Under Kong Ming'an's precise control, the spear disappeared and reappeared through countless passages like a specter, each appearance accompanied by the binding and sealing of its chi and blood chain. Dozens of crimson chains, living, writhing tentacles, sprang from impossible angles and wrapped, binding and tightening. Zhang Lexuan pushed her dodging to the limit, but it was like flailing inside a spider's web. Her safe space shrank with every move. With a soft, metallic sound, more than a dozen chains snapped tight, lashing her hands, feet, waist, abdomen, and even her neck. Her body froze in midair, completely immobilized. Kong Ming'an stepped out from the spatial ripples and stood not far in front of her. He paused, as if to offer terms. At that instant, Zhang Lexuan, bound fast, suddenly flared with resolve. The moon essence around her flared blindingly bright. Her bound figure blurred. In the next heartbeat, she vanished like a reflection. Behind Kong Ming'an, a streak of intense moon essence lit up. Zhang Lexuan reappeared like a wraith, a slender, razor-sharp moon-white blade condensed in her hand. She drove it precisely and without hesitation toward Kong Ming'an's lower abdomen, an area that could decide the match quickly without causing fatal harm and was easy to treat afterward. This was her full-power strike, condensed from every ounce of spirit power, will, and last hope. The moon blade pierced through the target's lower abdomen without resistance. She thought she had succeeded. Then the figure she had stabbed convulsed violently and burst open like a ruptured water bag. A dense crimson blood mist exploded outward, engulfing Zhang Lexuan. She was too close to react. A brutal, suffocating cold slammed into her. Her meridians were blocked, her spirit power sealed, even her connection to her spirit moon blurred. Powerlessness and despair washed over her body. The sensation dragged up a buried memory, the night her family had been slaughtered. It was worse than any previous time. She gritted her teeth and, with sheer will, refused to cry out in surrender. Her eyes locked onto the young man who had appeared in front of her. With her body heavy and numb, she raised her arm, gathered the last of her strength, and threw her final punch forward. 68. The boss's health bar is showing bang. A weak punch landed lightly against Kong Ming'an's chest, the body that everyone knew was the real one, producing only a faint sound, as soft as a whimper. With the last of her strength spent, Zhang Lexuan lost control, folded forward, and sank into a warm embrace. Fighting to stay conscious, she lifted her eyes, confusion clouding them, and asked the question that mattered most to her in that moment. Just, how old are you? Roughly 6 or 7 years younger than you, I suppose, Kong Ming'an answered quietly, his tone as gentle as ever. The smile in his voice was unchanged. Zhang Lexuan froze for a moment. Her heart sank into a deeper shock. She had investigated him before and knew his approximate age, but his behavior, his demeanor, and his strength had never matched a teenager's. For a while, she had even suspected that Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy had deliberately falsified his information to cultivate him, and that he might be nearly her age. His admission dispelled that thought at once. Unbelievable. She murmured the 2 words, then let her body rest against him, breathing in the young man's clean, unassuming scent. No wonder so many girls surrounded him at such a young age. Anyone would find him irresistible. Resigned, Zhang Lexuan closed her eyes and lay motionless in his arms, apparently fainted and completely unable to fight. At the corner of the arena, Ping Er and Fang Yi sat together, trading snacks, watching the scene with the calm curiosity of gossipers. There was nothing they could do. Both were support spirit masters. One was a soul engineer who specialized in defense. Their strength existed, but was negligible in comparison. They both knew the battle's outcome didn't rest with them, but with their captain, young Master Kong. So they watched with an easy conscience. A moment later, Ping-Er glanced at her captain, who lay shrouded in a dissipating blood mist and appeared unconscious and sighed helplessly. Fang Yi blinked and briefly met her look. Ping-Er then rose and deliberately stepped off the competition stage. With their captain out, a support spirit master could do no more. It was better to keep some dignity. At that point, the Shrek team had been completely defeated. Kong Ming'an stood, lifted Zhang Lexuan with gentle care, and in a blink reappeared in Shrek's resting area. Several eyes followed him, some wary, some fearful. The air grew thick with tension. He said nothing, merely walked through the crowd and laid Zhang Lexuan on a reclining chair. He extended his hand and pulled out the qi and blood blockage that had cramped her meridians and clouded her spirit. The faint pain made Zhang Lexuan give a muffled groan, then her spirit power returned to her. She had recovered. She looked at him, complexity in her gaze, but he had already turned to the surrounding Shrek team and said slowly, "Those who fought me just now, come over. I'll help you recover." The Shrek crowd exchanged glances and fell silent. On the competition stage, the referee hovered in midair and announced, struggling for composure amid disbelief, the second round of the 2-2-3 battle strategy, Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy wins. According to the competition rules, I hereby, on behalf of the Tianhun Empire, declare the winner of this year's All-Continent Advanced Spirit Master Academy Soul Dueling Grand Finals, Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy. Boom. The entire arena erupted. Discussion, exclamations, and stunned shouts washed through the stands. People were talking about the rise of a new myth and the fall of an old one. Today, the 10,000-year legend of Shrek had been knocked from its pedestal by Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy, decisively and almost crushingly. The crowd was in uproar. On the higher viewing platform, observers from the great forces watched mostly in silence. No matter their prior thoughts, Shrek's defeat had just been carved into their memories. As the academy that had produced a divinity 10,000 years ago and carried the title of being undefeated for a millennium, as the author of Shrek's glory in Dulo continent history, its brilliance was undeniable. It hung over the continent like a divinity, inspiring awe. Now, upon that golden brilliance, a tiny but glaring crack had appeared. In short, the boss's health bar was showing. On the viewing platform, Juzi, wearing a form-fitting uniform and half-rimmed glasses, watched the chaos below and instructed the people beside her, "Proceed according to the original plan." Yes, several figures answered and slipped through the sacred silent doorway behind them. They would spread news of what had happened here across the Duluo continent as fast as possible. Editors were already prepared. Within half an hour, the events would be turned into riveting articles. Within an hour, papers would be printed and released, and shortly after, the news would find its way into every city. Time moved on. Outside Shrek Outer Court, near the freshman dorms, the afternoon sun was warm and pleasant. Under a large tree, Muen lay back on a reclining chair, eyes narrowed, watching the comings and goings of first-year students and sighing softly. Youth is truly wonderful. A yellow stream of light descended nearby, revealing a middle-aged man in a flustered hurry. "Elder Mu." Muen lifted his head and glanced at him. The leisurely air left him instantly. He sighed and said, "What is it, Yan Xiaojie?" "Something terrible has happened, Elder Mu." Yan Xiaojie rushed forward and thrust a newspaper into Muen's hands. "We lost, Elder Mu, we lost." Muen scanned the paper and, to Yan Xiaojie's surprise, only showed a hint of interest. "They actually lost," he said. There was little disappointment in his voice, if anything, amusement. "Elder Mu." Yan Xiaojie's expression was frantic. "This is Shrek's glory. How can our 10,000-year prestige be ruined like this? I think—" "Enough, Xiaojie," Muen interrupted, then lay back down and spoke casually. "It's just the outcome of a match. How can it be called ruination?" "But Elder Mu." "No buts." Muen looked up at the swaying branches and the patches of sunlight on the leaves, his eyes calm. "Shrek has been basking in so-called glory for far too long. If that continues, it will be a disaster, not a blessing. This defeat, for Shrek, may not necessarily be a bad thing. 69. Holy Soul Ring time crept forward, and in the blink of an eye more than a month had passed. The results of the All-Continent Advanced Spirit Master Academy Soul Fighting Tournament, pushed by the Ming'an Daily and its controlled public opinion network, spread across the continent like a storm. No major power made any public statements, but the Ming'an Daily's newspapers poured out their coverage without restraint. What looked like the outcome of an academy competition quietly changed the balance of things across the continent. At the same time, the Body Sect, once a hidden organization, made a conspicuous appearance at a royal banquet in the Tianhun Empire. Reporters wrote that the Body Sect master, the Tianhun Emperor, and the vice president of Ming'an Commerce had all been present and were seen conversing cheerfully. Rumors of cooperation between the Body Sect, Ming'an Commerce, and the Tianhun Empire began to circulate, making the already delicate situation even more convoluted. Kong Ming'an, who had staged much of this, did not dwell on the consequences. He had other matters on his mind. At the ice and fire yin-yang, well, on the cold spring side, milky white mist drifted. Through the haze, two figures could be seen embracing in the center of the pool. The bitterly cold energy of the spring flowed like a steady current, pouring into one of the figures and cooling everything around them. On the shore, Tang sat with a tall girl. The girl had neat golden hair, fair skin, and a pretty face, with especially long, straight legs and a pair of white rabbit ears atop her head that made her look charming. It was Jiang Nan. In the original story, Jiang Nan had suffered inner trauma after being forced into a terrible bargain because of family poverty and her mother's illness. Now, thanks to the Enlightenment Plan Kong Ming'an had launched early on, Jiang Nan, an exceptional commoner spirit master, was quickly noticed and sponsored by Ming'an Commerce when she entered the academy. She still studied at Shrek Academy but had become an affiliate of the Commerce and was Tangya's roommate and good friend. Kong Ming'an had said he would give Tangya an assistant and left the choice to Juzi. Looking at Tangya's social circle, Juzi allowed Tangya to pick for herself. Tangya had chosen her friend. Both of them chewed on tender strands of blue-silver grass, absorbing its life force and watching the figures in the cold spring while whispering to each other. "Sk, President Kong is really busy," Tangya murmured. "He chats with two other girls for a while, then hugs a beautiful sister, and now they've been hugging for a whole week." She was impressed by how her president had led the Sun Moon team to defeat Shrek, a feat she'd read about in the papers, but even more amazed by how he managed all those relationships without anything going wrong, how everyone seemed to fit together so smoothly. She hugged Jiang Nan and warned, Nan, you absolutely must keep your eyes open and not be fooled by bad men." Jiang Nan blinked, puzzled for a moment, but smiled and nodded. I'll listen to Xiaoya. I definitely won't be deceived by men." Tangya narrowed her eyes and leaned in. "What if it's the president who wants to deceive you?" Jiangnan glanced instinctively at the pale blue figure in the cold spring, then looked away. "If the president deceives me, he must have his reasons. I trust him." Tangya puffed her cheeks in defeat. Confirmed, she thought, her best friend was hopeless. At that moment, the mist over the cold spring, which had been still for days, rippled. Kong Ming'an and the Snow Empress emerged clearly from the haze, their hands naturally clasped as they walked across the ice toward the shore. Snow Empress's long white hair shimmered, her aura calm and composed. The extreme cold of the spring had done its work. After more than a month, the damage she had suffered from the God-sealing platform had basically healed. Kong Ming'an noticed the pair on the shore and caught the intent glances. Tangya and Jiang Nan, who had been chatting, immediately dropped their eyes to the sprouting blue-silver grass, as if to show they hadn't been staring. Snow Empress's cool voice asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Kong Ming'an said, withdrawing his gaze. A faint emotion crossed his face. "I just suddenly feel that, without realizing it, I've changed the destinies of a lot of people." Snow Empress tilted her head, a trace of confusion in her eyes. She couldn't quite grasp what he meant, so she simply leaned against him and tightened her grip on his hand. Without disturbing Tangya and Jiang Nan, Kong Ming'an led Snow Empress to the other side of the cold spring and sat cross-legged on a nearby futon. He began to carefully observe the energy structure of Snow Empress's body in his mind, working on completing the elementalization that was already more than 80% finished. At the same time, he felt the spirit power in his own meridians reach a critical mark. Level 20. From the day he first gained a spirit ring until now, it had taken less than 2 years. In those 2 years, most of his energy had gone into research, experiments, and handling affairs. He had spent little time on true cultivation. Reaching level 20 so fast was not normal. The reason for this rapid rise was a kind of cultivation cheat code. With a thought, a deep black spirit ring appeared in his palm. It was a 10,000-year spirit ring taken from a thorny dragon, but it didn't float placidly. Instead, it rotated slowly like a nebula. At its center, a quiet, stable vortex of spirit power spun, autonomously drawing origin chi from the surrounding world and converting it into pure spirit power. This was the Saint Guiding Spirit Ring. In Iliek's original world system, the Divine Throne of Seal, there existed world treasures called spirit furnaces. A spirit furnace was not a weapon or armor, but a special core-like artifact that could integrate into the user's body and grant miraculous abilities. Among them, the Saint Guiding Spirit Furnace's greatest function was its ability to maintain a spirit power vortex that continuously accumulated spirit power for its owner, steadily raising their realm. The so-called Sacred Guiding Spirit Ring was Iliek's modification of the Spirit Ring's internal structure, built on Kong Ming'an's early theory of spirit ring plasticity, and borrowing from the core principles of the Sacred Guiding Spirit Furnace. Its essence was to create and seal a stable spirit power vortex inside a ring, giving it 2 major functions. The first was fully automatic cultivation. The ring could continuously absorb surrounding heaven and earth origin chi and convert it into spirit power, steadily raising its owner's cultivation until a bottleneck was reached. It was essentially a cultivation cheat, perfect for someone like Kong Ming'an, who had little time to sit and cultivate. The second function grew naturally from the first. Everyone knew the strength of the spell cultivator system was instant, massive spirit ability barrages, but those barrages consumed enormous spirit power. Iliek's proposed using a spirit ring itself as an energy storage ring, tapping the ring's own stored energy to release spirit abilities without touching the spirit master's personal spirit power. That allowed spell cultivators to use abilities far more recklessly. Even so, if a caster unleashed continuous, high-intensity attacks, the ring's own recovery might still fall short. The Sacred Guiding Ring, however, greatly enhanced that self-recovery. Its vortex let the ring rapidly absorb heaven and earth chi and convert it back into spirit power to replenish what was spent, effectively easing the massive consumption problem of the spell cultivator system. In short, it strengthened the spell cultivator model once more. Having essentially understood the Spirit Master system of the Doluo world through the spell cultivator research, Iliek, the Saint Necromancer, had also turned his attention elsewhere. Lately, he had been deep into research on spirit ring fusion, trying to fuse multiple rings and solidify them to push past the upper limits of ring lifespan, pursuing the ideal of 9 million-year spirit rings. It was very much Elder Yi's temperament. Kong Ming'an, however, had another promising idea of his own. He calmed his mind and continued refining the details of elementalization while pondering his choice for a second spirit ring. His primary goal was unchanged: prioritize spirit beasts with rare attributes, like those of time or destiny. There were 2 particularly useful special types he wanted: the Mirror Shadow Beast and the Silver Essence Beast. The Mirror Shadow Beast's innate mirror image replication and the Silver Essence Beast's innate imprint were both extremely practical. If his conjecture held, those 2 abilities might let him master almost all elemental energies without being limited to absorbing spirit rings to obtain elements. He had already dispatched people to the Stardew Great Forest and the Ice-Sealed Forest to search. The target in the former was the 35,000-year-old Silver Essence Beast mentioned in the original work. For the latter, he sought the Mirror Shadow Beast, though it was unclear whether it was extinct. He was not worried about his team's chances. By his usual luck, such expeditions tended to go smoothly. Settling back into observation, Kong Ming'an prepared to push elementalization forward. Then he frowned. In the next instant, he conjured the divine examination of destruction in one palm and opened a gray, semi-planar door beside him with the other. He summoned his backup with the examination while peering beyond the Belin 7 absolute flower poison array, and there he saw a figure outside the array watching. The young man's face was ordinary, but his eyes carried a shadow of gloom. Tang San stood outside the Belin 7 absolute flower poison array, his clothes tattered like a beggar's. At that moment, his expression shifted, and a wild urge to howl at the sky rose in him. 2 months. 2 months. Did people know how he had spent those 2 months? The Clear Sky Sect lay within the Tianhun Empire, not far from the Sunset Forest. Even on foot, Tang San should have made it in at most half a month. In reality, it had taken him a full 2 months. The trouble began at the Clear Sky Sect. Unaccountably, the sect had been placed under martial law, and the mountain gate was heavily guarded, so Tang San's plans to leave were stalled. Then a fierce battle between 2 elders tore through the sect and smashed 2 mountain peaks. One of them, the Disciple Peak, where Tang San was staying. The collapsing buildings crushed his body and bones, dislocated his organs, leaving multiple internal injuries. If he had not used the last of his divine sense to stop a falling boulder, he might have died. He was hauled down the mountain for treatment, and, with the faint residue of his divine sense, recovered surprisingly fast, just over a month. When he finally left the mountain and headed toward the Sunset Forest, his nightmare worsened. On the first day out, he met 2 bandits of Spirit Emperor level who robbed him of all his money and supplies. The next day in the city, without money, an innkeeper threw him out, and the innkeeper's son, a Spirit King, broke his leg. Homeless, Tang San slept in a street corner. Beggars claimed his spot. When he refused and revealed his spirit to drive them off, they retaliated by heaving a basket of rotten eggs on him while he slept. On the 3rd day, he washed at a stream and set off, only to be ambushed by bandits again. He was badly beaten, his leg broken a second time, and left by the roadside like a dead dog. He kept pushing forward. He broke his leg once more for failing to pay a toll to city gate guards. He broke a hand stealing food. He was chased by a spirit beast while sheltering in the forest, stumbled into someone else's camp, and was attacked for trespassing, ganged up on by 3 spirit ancestors. From the moment he left the mountain until he stood outside the Belin array now, every day had been an ordeal. He'd been beaten, robbed, injured. There was no normal day in that stretch. It felt as if the world itself singled him out. Still, he had one consolation. He believed that if he revealed his divine examination, showed his divine aura, and declared his identity, the immortal herbs within the ice and fire yin-yang of well would immediately submit. They would have no choice. At that thought, Tang San stepped forward. A faint thread of his dwindling divine force slipped forth as he activated the Sea God Divine Examination. A blue-gold divine light flashed, rippling outward toward the ice and fire yin-yang well. Tang San stood with his hands behind his back, expression detached, waiting quietly. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 1 minute, 2 minutes, half an hour. His brows tightened. Something was wrong. Where were his immortal herbs? Infusing memories with divine sense, shaping a personality, replacing the original one. It's quite a trick he came up with. Inside the ice and fire yin-yang. Well, the god of destruction's divine thought, the projection Kong Ming'an had summoned through a god's trial, actually praised Tang San for the first time. He shook his head with a wry sigh and looked at Kong Ming'an. It's obvious that's his method, but right now his soul and body are basically original. Theoretically, he's a divinity successor carrying a god's trial, so by the rules of the god realm, I really can't move against him. Kong Ming'an nodded. Filling memories and shaping personalities, it was the kind of thing Tang Fozu favored. In the original timeline, Wang Donger, Wang Chuer, and the patched-together horror Tang Wutong had all been created that way. Tang Fozu truly lived up to his name and had even found a loophole. The god of destruction paused for a moment, then laughed. He waved a hand and projected Tang San's recent misfortunes, pushing the scenes before Kong Ming'an. Still, the plane really hasn't favored this sea god. Kong Ming'an glanced and saw Tang San being kicked like a stray dog by several burly men on a roadside. He almost couldn't keep a straight face. Even in that fragmentary vision, the plain will's hostility was palpable. Although this Tang San bears a god's trial and a trace of divine sense, the plain will can't outright kill him, but it can make everything go wrong for him without effort. Even the trace of divine sense has been eroded recently, so he won't be beaten to death. If it were allowed to fully erupt, it wouldn't be able to reach divinity-level power, and if it did, that would mean he'd again broken the rules by descending divine sense. Then he's no threat, Kong Ming'an concluded. If Tang San couldn't access divinity-level power, he wasn't dangerous to Kong Ming'an. And if he could, the god of destruction would have a legitimate pretext to impede God King Tang. The god of destruction seemed exhilarated by that prospect. His old friends had left him too many loose ends, and the chance to act, even to vent a little, appealed to him. Moreover, the object of his ire wasn't just weak, but felt like punching the former Asura god, which made it all the more satisfying. Watching Tang San outside the poison array, whose expression shifted from calm to rage, eyes reddening as he panted and finally slunk away, defeated, both god and man had their own reactions. The god of destruction took him as a source of amusement, a joke collection to flip through for leisure. Kong Ming'an considered possible uses. Could he impose the sea god's trial on this Tang San to strip Tang Fozu of his sea god status, or go further and interfere with Tang Fozu's Asura god position? Weakening an enemy is as effective as strengthening oneself. For now, God King Tang was isolated outside the Duluo plain, and Kong Ming'an had no opportunity to act, until fate delivered one. He watched Tang San, who wandered into a patch of bad luck, ran into a pack of century-level flying spirit beasts, and fled with his head down. Kong Ming'an grinned at the thought. It would be a shame not to throw him into Shrek. The little interlude about Tang San ended there. He was still too weak to be of real use. Beyond entertainment, he had no practical value. To avoid accidents, the god of destruction placed a mark on him. If Tang San ever openly broke the rules, the god would intervene. As an extra, Kong Ming'an could use the god's trial to follow Tang San's unlucky life under the plain will as ongoing amusement. Life settled into a quiet rhythm. Time slipped by in the yin-yang, and more than a month passed. By the cold spring, Kong Ming'an sat composed, his aura restrained yet harmonizing subtly with the surrounding elemental energies. He closed his eyes, raised a hand, and with a thought, a pure translucent glow flowed beneath the skin of his arm. The limb took on an ethereal texture, like flesh condensed from the purest heaven and earth energy, while still feeling solid and alive. At last, he had perfected his version of elementalization. A satisfied smile tugged at his lips. He opened his eyes and suddenly found himself staring into a pair of ice-blue eyes, impossibly close. The Snow Empress had arrived without his noticing. Her delicate face carried a faint, curious expression she couldn't quite hide. Her long white hair cascaded over her shoulders, and a breeze from the shore lifted a few strands that brushed his cheek. "Snow Empress?" Kong Ming'an murmured. Startled, she seemed to notice their nearness for the first time. A subtle ripple crossed her cool features. She stepped back slightly and averted her gaze. "Nothing," she said, her voice as cold as ever. Kong Ming'an chuckled but did not press. He reached out and took her hand. It was cool and soft in his palm. Looking into those ice-blue eyes, he smiled and helped the Snow Empress to her feet. "Let's go." He raised his other hand and opened a gray, undead demi-plane door beside them, then led her through. This was a trip they had planned long ago. Their destination was Dragon City in the northern Tianhun Empire. As an important northern stronghold, Dragon City had a rugged, austere look, its streets lined with buildings of massive stone. At that moment, within Dragon City, at the Ming'an Commerce Association's headquarters, a spatial door opened quietly. Kong Ming'an and the Snow Empress stepped out together. 72, the mysterious 10,000-year ice essence and the gradual refinement of the system. Over the past month, not only had the Snow Empress's wounds healed under the nurturing waters of the ice and fire yin-yang well, but the political landscape of the continent had shifted as well. The alliance between the Ming'an Commerce Association, the Body Sect, and the Tianhun Empire was made public, and the announcement set off a chain reaction. The probes that had been targeting the Ming'an Commerce Association vanished overnight, and commerce across the Duo Three Kingdoms suddenly cleared and prospered. Many sects that had hesitated after receiving invitations from Ming'an now made up their minds. Some opened talks of cooperation, others joined outright. The Ming'an Commerce Association's influence swelled like a rolling snowball. Among the groups that established trade ties with Ming'an was the Earth Dragon sect. Kong Ming'an's real reason for visiting was its cold spring, more precisely, the 10,000-year profound ice cave at the heart of that spring. Without drawing attention, the two of them arrived outside an ancient well in the sect's rear courtyard. The chill rising from the wellhead made the Snow Empress's eyes brighten. She sensed an exceptionally pure, extreme cold spirit qi concentrated directly beneath the wellhead. Kong Ming'an didn't hesitate. He grabbed Snow Empress and jumped into the well. Wrapping himself in spirit power, he insulated his body from the surrounding spring water and muted the assault of cold. Still, as they descended, the temperature dropped further and frost began to gather around them. He instinctively exhaled a breath that might have made the cold worse. Then Snow Empress released his hand, slipped her arms around his waist, and pulled him into her embrace. Kong Ming'an blinked in surprise. Snow Empress stared calmly ahead, her eyes clear and cold. A dense sheath of extreme ice and snow spirit power condensed around them, shielding them from the outward chill. He was silent for a moment. If he had completed elementalization, he could likely have ignored this cold entirely. But looking at Snow Empress's profile, so intent on resisting the current, he let it go. They continued downward, passing undercurrents and entering a wider subterranean space. The surrounding rock was no longer ordinary stone, but a deep, blue-hued formation that radiated astonishing cold. 10,000-year profound ice cave, Snow Empress murmured, her voice threaded with complexity. What had been a guess before was now confirmation. This place contained 10,000-year profound ice marrow. For an ice-attributed spirit beast like her, such marrow was the highest-grade heaven and earth treasure. Absorbing it could fully restore her origin and make tribulations of 700,000 years, or even 800,000 years, no longer a problem. Kong Ming'an sensed the value of the place and motioned without words. Snow Empress, help me remove those ice-extreme divine crystals. She blinked and followed his instruction. With a graceful wave, extreme cold spirit power spread from her fingertips. The rock-embedded, nearly impenetrable ice-extreme divine crystals were peeled free by an invisible force and floated toward them. Kong Ming'an opened a small demiplane portal and stored the crystals in its warehouse. He planned to study and use them later. They pressed deeper. At one point, the pressure on Kong Ming'an's body suddenly eased, and he and the Snow Empress slipped into a secluded cavern. The moment they touched down, an indescribably pure, extreme cold washed over them. Dozens of translucent white crystal pillars, like stalactites, rose in the cave, each containing something that flowed like liquid. Indeed, 10,000-year profound ice marrow, Snow Empress said, her expression rarely changing, but her eyes colored with deep emotion. Kong Ming'an acted decisively. His spatial power formed fine threads that severed the crystal pillars cleanly. He pushed the pieces toward Snow Empress. Start absorbing. This should be enough to restore your origin. Snow Empress stared at the marrow for a long moment, then turned to Kong Ming'an. Do you know the value of this 10,000-year profound ice marrow? I do, he answered calmly. She looked puzzled. Then you still let me have it? Is there any reason I wouldn't? Kong Ming'an replied, his tone natural and untroubled. The question hung between them. Snow Empress fixed him with ice-blue eyes as if trying to read him, but they betrayed nothing. Eventually she looked away and, without further words, sat cross-legged. With a slight mental motion, the pieces of marrow drifted toward her, and the arcane, frigid essence began to pour into her. The incomparably pure, cold energy surged through her body, knitting up the damage in her origin inflicted by the heavenly tribulation. Kong Ming'an watched quietly. He also split his attention, returning in thought to the next stage of his elementalization research, the problems of form solidification and state anchoring. To maintain a temporary elementalization form for an extended period without continuously expending large amounts of energy, one must find a sufficiently stable anchor point. He had already determined the optimal anchor long ago, the spirit ring, specifically the seventh spirit ring, the spirit avatar. Whether for traditional spirit masters, the spell cultivator path, or the body cultivator path, all originated from the established spirit master system. Differences existed, but so did many parallels. The seventh spirit ring represented a qualitative leap. For a spell cultivator, reaching the seventh ring would allow mastery of elementalization, greatly enhancing elemental resonance, spirit ability power, and survivability. For a body cultivator, the seventh ring would yield chi blood transformation, mastery over the power of chi and blood, the ability to be reborn from a drop of blood and to sustain near immortality so long as chi and blood remained. As Snow Empress absorbed the 10,000-year profound ice marrow and her vitality mended, Kong Ming'an's two nascent Tao systems began to refine themselves, step by gradual step. Just as Kong Ming'an's path forward became clearer, the Snow Empress finished absorbing the 10,000-year profound ice marrow. The process hadn't taken long, only about 2 hours, and when she opened her eyes, the aura around her had changed utterly. Her spirit power, already solid and heavy, seemed to have almost taken on substance, radiating an oppressive pressure that continued to condense. She exhaled a breath of cold air and felt as if a set of shackles had been shed. A long-lost lightness washed over her. She felt inexplicably at ease. The recovery of her origin wasn't instantaneous, but the 10,000-year profound ice marrow was perfectly matched to a being of pure ice. After just the initial absorption, far from using it all, her origin was already more than halfway restored. Given time, it would fully recover and push her to an even higher level. By then, a 700,000-year heavenly tribulation would be beyond doubt. Even an 800,000-year tribulation would not intimidate her. But the Snow Empress was silent. She regarded the ever-calm young man beside her with complicated eyes. Kong Ming'an didn't notice the look. His attention was on the remaining marrow. In the original sequence, the Snow Empress had absorbed 13 pieces at once and sealed 7, but this time she'd only needed 8 to repair the origin injuries caused by the failed spirit core condensation and the heavenly tribulation. Perhaps because she hadn't nearly self-destructed this time, her recovery had been easier. Kong Ming'an studied the 37 10,000-year profound ice marrow before him. After a pause, he asked directly, if you want to heal Binger's origin injuries and ensure she can pass the 400,000-year heavenly tribulation, how many of these would you need? The Snow Empress blinked, thinking a moment. Her ice-blue eyes met his quietly, and she gave an estimate. Binger's injuries aren't too severe. To heal her and let her pass the 400,000-year tribulation would probably take 3 to 5 pieces. Is that so? Kong Ming'an murmured, but his hands did not hesitate. He separated 30 of the 37 marrows and placed them in front of the Snow Empress. Take these 10,000-year profound ice marrow. The Snow Empress went completely still, staring at the 30 pieces as if uncertain. She said nothing for a long moment, then abruptly looked up at Kong Ming'an and asked bluntly, You didn't plan from the start to have me abduct the Ice Empress, did you? Kong Ming'an nearly laughed inwardly. That wasn't the plan, he said. Those 30 are the portion agreed on in our contract to heal Binger so she can pass the 400,000-year tribulation. The rest are for you to absorb and accumulate energy while I help you later with condensing your spirit core. He explained earnestly. His purpose hadn't changed. Strengthen the Snow Empress continuously so she could handle any threat on his behalf short of divinities. If possible, he even wanted to cultivate her into a divinity and solve his worries completely. As for the Ice Empress, yes, as a 390,000-year spirit beast, she mattered as material and as a sample, but nothing more. The Snow Empress continued to regard him, a faint ripple in her gaze. After a long silence, she asked again, simply, Really? Kong Ming'an felt a headache coming and forced himself to be straightforward. It's true. She remained suspicious, but when it came to most things, she trusted his word implicitly. Only on matters like this did doubts rise. After a moment, she seemed to make up her mind, sighed softly, and returned to her usual calm. She gathered the 30 marrow and, as before, stood by Kong Ming'an's side as if nothing had happened. Kong Ming'an watched her, unable to read her thoughts, but seeing her composure, he let it be. he stored the remaining 7 pieces as research material. With that, everything from the 10,000-year profound ice cave had been dealt with. He opened a spatial portal, and they stepped back into the undead demiplane. They emerged near a huge hall filled with portals, gateways to every city on the Duluo continent. Members of the Ming'an Commerce Association flowed through them in an orderly, busy stream, the network of information and resources humming with activity. At a portal to Snowfield City, the Snow Empress paused. She looked at Kong Ming'an as if she wanted to say something, then turned and stepped through, disappearing from sight. Kong Ming'an stood watching the place she'd vanished into. He had grown used to her constant presence. Now that she was gone, a small, inexplicable emptiness set in. He felt oddly insecure. Ever since Da Ming and Er Ming's assassination attempt, he'd preferred to have an ultimate-level power at his side. Shaking off the feeling, he resolved to return to Mingdu. It was safer at home, and he could consult Elder Yi about his plans and the feasibility. A few steps later, a fitted uniform emerged from a nearby portal. Juzi's gaze landed on him and brightened. She hurried forward and announced without hesitation, "President, the spirit beast you wanted has been captured." Mingdu, inside the Hall of Worship, in one of the most secure, high-spec laboratories, Kong Ming'an stepped out of the spatial doorway. The moment he emerged, he felt the opposing auras of 2 neighboring chambers. To his left, a sacred, still presence. To his right, a scorching, expansive one. Elder Yi's secluded study lay on one side, where Yi was researching ways to extend spirit ring lifespans through ring fusion. On the other side was the lab run by his grandfather, Kong Deming, where a team of Rank 9 soul engineers worked on integrating natal spirit tools with body cultivators. His own lab, sandwiched between the two and under maximum security, was clearly arranged by Kong Deming and Elder Yi. Relaxing slightly, Kong Ming'an set the beast-sealing platform Juzi had given him on the experimental table and peered in. The spirit beast inside showed a ferocious face, bared fangs. Its posture was dog-like, but its limbs were thick, its body covered in silver-white scales that shimmered with an odd spirit power fluctuation. "A silver eagle beast, as expected," he murmured. He confirmed the identification easily. The beast's cultivation was roughly 35,000 years, the same one that appeared in the original work. Without hesitation, he unsealed the platform. As the seal broke, he mercilessly ended the dazed creature's life. A deep black spirit ring formed. Kong Ming'an produced a soul catcher, a tool for clearing residual souls from spirit rings, and precisely stripped the silver eagle beast's remaining soul from the ring. Then he sat cross-legged and began to absorb it. The process went smoothly, no unexpected incidents. A few hours later, the spirit ring was fully absorbed, and he entered a temporary seclusion to purge the ring's useless memories, leaving only the purest imprint soul skill module. Unlike many spirit beasts that carried multiple soul skill modules tangled with heaps of irrelevant memories, this silver eagle beast essentially only possessed the imprint ability. That made cleanup far less time-consuming. After a day of focus, Kong Ming'an had cleared the bulk of the beast's memory fragments and retained only the imprint module. He exhaled and took out a yellow, century-old spirit ring, one crafted by the Snow Empress, engraved with the soul skill module Snowfall. He poured in spirit power. The ring acted as a one-time consumable and activated Snowfall. In an instant, the laboratory filled with the Snow Empress's ultimate ice and snow aura. Temperature plunged, and countless pure white flakes condensed and drifted like a dream. At the same moment, the imprint ring at his side pulsed. Imprint activated, and the imprint succeeded. The first step had worked. Without hesitation, Kong Ming'an lifted his hand and pointed. The Arctic aura flared again. The air chilled, and instead of forming snowflakes, a glacial blue energy gathered quietly at his fingertip. The Snow Empress's signature ice and snow attribute, something unique to her, had at this moment been absorbed and mastered by Kong Ming'an. "It worked," he said, a smile appearing. As he'd suspected, using imprint to copy a soul skill module of another attribute let him observe and construct the corresponding elemental energy while the spirit ability ran, and thereby master that attribute. Imprint analyzed and recorded the energy structure frequency and operational mode of the target spirit ability, then replicated it into his own soul skill module, a form of learning and engraving. Memory of the original work came to mind. Huo Guo had once imprinted Shu Sanqi's Xuanming displacement. That proved imprint could carry a spirit ability's attribute. After all, without copying the spatial attribute, Xuanming displacement couldn't occur. Until now, that had been conjecture. Today, Ming'an had demonstrated it in practice. He brought out more spirit rings. The lab became a kaleidoscope of activated spirit abilities: lightning, flames, water spheres, wind blades, dust. One by one, he imprinted and mastered them. Soon the consumption was complete, and he extended his hand. Lightning arced, fire roared, water swirled, wind blades sliced, and dust eddied in his palm. They coexisted without interference, oddly harmonious. He'd now mastered all the basic elemental energies. Ming'an experimented with elementalization, testing combinations and transitions. After a while, he dispelled the effects, sat back in a nearby chair, and considered the implications. Mastering different energies was useful, but that felt like a side effect. The real value of imprint lay elsewhere. The moment imprint activated, the imprinted soul skill module analyzed and replicated the target. That process dramatically accelerated his mastery of the module, speeding his progress in self-condensing soul skill modules. That advantage, he realized, could be multiplied if imprint could be replicated onto a spirit tool. Spirit ring flushing technology was already mature. It could simultaneously remove residual souls, discard the vast useless memories, and clear soul skill modules from a spirit ring. It had been used to flush rings dropped by the deaths of countless soft-boned rabbits, turning them into blank spirit rings to carry other modules. The same method could be applied to spirit masters. Flush a spirit master's existing rings into blanks, then use an imprinting spirit tool to imprint desired soul skill modules onto the blanks. In short, you could edit a spirit ring's spirit abilities at will. A spirit master could pick and combine the set of abilities they preferred. If they were unhappy with their abilities, they could respec, flush, and re-imprint until satisfied. Because the rings would be flushed directly into blanks, the ring's full carrying capacity would be released, effectively allowing a single spirit ring to hold multiple soul skill modules, similar to a spell cultivator's setup, with largely the same usage. Ming'an's lips curled. So, was this, he thought, a different kind of low-threshold spell cultivator? It isn't just lowering the bar, it's essentially a degradation. Ming'an sat back and considered the issue for a long moment before concluding aloud. At first glance, the casual respects, the arbitrary imprinting of chosen spirit abilities, even a single spirit ring containing multiple soul skill modules, it all looked like a shortcut to the same results as orthodox spell cultivators. In practice, however, the method had clear drawbacks. The soul skill modules produced by imprinting carried a spirit power load far higher than those self-condensed through mastery. Roughly speaking, an imprinted module demanded 3 to 4 times the load of a naturally generated one. If a spirit ring's capacity was 100 and a self-condensed fireball module required a load of 10, an imprinted fireball module might demand 30 or even 40. By that math, a self-condensed ring could carry 10 fireball modules, while an imprinted ring would be limited to 2 or 3. Because self-condensing implies a deep understanding of the skill, the condenser could optimize and reduce a module's load over time. An imprinted module, however, reflected the owner's limited grasp and could only be used as is. That distinction made imprinting more similar to the way spirit masters traditionally borrow spirit rings: convenient but constrained. It was the difference between full automation, system-assisted operation, and genuine autonomy. The more advanced and complex a spirit ability, the worse the problem became. Some high-level abilities simply produced too great a load to be imprinted at all. Ming'an himself could not imprint some of Snow Empress's advanced techniques, like Empress's Palm and Empress's Sword, because the post-imprint load would exceed his ring's upper limit. The same explained why the Silver Eagle Beast had failed to imprint the spirit abilities of 100,000-year spirit beasts. Its own capacity couldn't bear the load produced by those ancient spirits. Compared to spell cultivators, who can build and refine soul skill modules themselves, imprinting is more of a transitional comfort zone, he mused. Spirit masters might find it hard to leap straight into the spell cultivator path. Imprinting first and then attempting self-condensation could be a practical route. Yet he also saw how many would happily stay in that comfort zone. He could foresee two camps forming as the new system matured. A self-condensation faction, those who independently condense and optimize soul skill modules, the true foundation of spell cultivators, and an imprint faction, those who become spell cultivators by the opportunistic, easier route. It was roughly the difference between an archmage and a mage, he thought, and his mind began to roam further. Imprinting had an unmatched advantage for militaries that needed uniformity. Every soldier's abilities could be standardized and respect on demand to meet tactical needs. Assault, defense, command, support, healing. Within a unit, roles could be switched perfectly by re-imprinting the right soul skill modules. Technically, the main challenge would be replicating spirit ability effects onto spirit tools. But since he could observe and map the energy structure of those effects, that didn't seem insurmountable. He made a mental note and added it to his growing to-do list. The list was already crowded. Ice and Fire Yin-Yang Well Energy Model, deep modifications to spirit rings, the possibility of multiple soul cores coexisting, development of tool spirits, items he could do, each well within his competence, but all painstakingly time-consuming. He sighed. He needed a way to increase his thinking speed and computational power, not a mundane computer that required manual operation, but something that could perform secondary thinking and push projects forward on its own. Artificial intelligence? A sub-brain? The idea excited him. He could forge a sub-brain from the fragments of soul his own soul naturally shed during its continuous metamorphosis, and then give it a massive computing matrix as a body to accelerate calculations. It was feasible. Then abruptly, he stopped. His expression grew oddly troubled. He had been trying to solve the problem of too many stubborn to-dos. So why, he wondered, did another to-do item just appear? A helpless sense crept in. There were always more things to do. Far to the north, in the world of the extreme north, a similar immensity of problems did not plague the land itself. Eternal ice and wind stretched in endless white and deep blue. Gale and razor snow screamed across the plains, and the place earned its name as a forbidding zone for humans. Cold, silent, and near lifeless, it was a domain of absolute winter. Then, as if a new law of nature had been declared, a noble chill descended over that silence. Snow Empress appeared, floating in midair. Her hair was the color of fresh snow and fell behind her without disorder. Her ice-blue eyes were impassive, but contained an awe-inspiring majesty that seemed to look down on the world. The blizzards at the heart of the extreme north stilled as her presence washed through them. Her absolute coldness imposed a hush upon the wind. All across the land, powerful spirit beasts raised their heads from lairs, keening or roaring in voices that mixed fear, reverence, and submission. Many bowed their proud necks toward her. Snow Empress stood motionless in the sky, letting her aura spread, as if waiting for something. Finally, she raised her eyes and stared toward the horizon. From deep within the ice plain, a streak of light, jade green and piercing against the pale landscape, appeared and came toward her at astonishing speed. A flicker of indifference left her gaze. At the same time, for no obvious reason, an inexplicable unease rose within her. A shaft of emerald light descended nearby and resolved into a jade-green scorpion. The instant it touched down, its body flashed again, and from the radiance stepped a small, quick girl. She had long emerald hair, golden eyes, and wore an exquisite green and white dress, trimmed with gold and inset with translucent emerald gems. A white lace bow cinched her waist. Dark stockings patterned with delicate lace covered her legs. Behind her, a barbed gold and green scorpion tail, carved with ornate patterns and radiating a sharp aura, proclaimed her pedigree at a glance. She was the second of the 3 great heavenly kings of the land of the extreme north, the 7th of the 10 great vicious beasts, the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion, the Snow Empress. "Snow Empress, you finally came back," the other girl cried, excitement and relief flooding her voice. Without pausing, she leapt forward and hugged Snow Empress tightly. "I missed you so much, Binger. Where have you been all these hundreds, no, thousands of years? Why didn't you come see me?" And her questions tumbled out in a rush. The coldness in Snow Empress's expression softened a little. She returned the embrace gently and soothed her with a calm voice. Haven't I come back now, Binger? That's true. Binger nodded, but she didn't let the subject drop. She wrinkled her nose and sniffed Snow Empress, and a flicker of doubt crossed her golden eyes. Snow Empress, why do you smell? Like a human, and it's strong. Snow Empress's gaze slipped for a heartbeat, then she stepped back without changing her face. Before Binger could press further, Snow Empress flipped her wrist and 5 translucent 10,000-year mystic ice marrows drifted into her palm. Binger's attention snapped to them. 10,000-year mystic ice marrow, she breathed, incredulous. Snow Empress, where did you get these? Snow Empress shook her head but did not answer directly. Her voice turned serious. Your origin's old injury never fully healed. Use these 10,000-year mystic ice marrows to mend it. After that, I will be your protector while you undergo your 400,000-year heavenly tribulation. Binger hesitated. Snow Empress seemed to be hiding something. There was an oddness to her manner, but the urgency and earnestness in her words drove the questions back. She took the marrows without another protest, and under Snow Empress's watchful gaze began to absorb them. A few days later, in the heart of the land of the extreme north, Binger opened her eyes. The 10,000-year mystic ice marrows were perfectly compatible with an ice attribute spirit beast. 3.5 of the marrows completely healed the damage in her origin left by the previous heavenly tribulation. The remaining half-piece broke open the long-stalled barrier in her strength and forced a breakthrough. She lowered her gaze to feel the surge of power and, as all true spirit beasts know, sensed an approaching change. The heavenly tribulation that had still been decades away was now imminent. Snow Empress watched everything. Seeing that Binger's origin had been restored, she asked quietly, How do you feel? How confident are you about facing your tribulation? Binger's lips curved into a proud smile, and her golden eyes flashed with confidence. 10 out of 10. Snow Empress nodded once, a faint understanding in her eyes. Then, with sudden seriousness, she said, Then there's no time to waste. Let's start the tribulation now. Now. Binger was caught off guard. Yes, now. Snow Empress's tone carried an urgency that went beyond the ordinary. Binger frowned. Snow Empress had been acting oddly since her return. Now she seemed even more anxious. Something was wrong. Some instinctive unease rose in Binger's chest. But Snow Empress's steady, purposeful gaze shut the question down. After a moment's silence, Binger nodded and flew out to an open ice plain. She revealed her true form and cast off whatever suppression had held her back. The sky darkened at once. Thick clouds thickened and roiled, and a terrible lightning tribulation gathered, crackling with raw, destructive power. Binger drew in a deep breath and fought the odd feeling in her heart, then fixed her eyes and reached out to take the lightning as it formed. Thunder crashed. Lightning stabbed the sky. Bolts leapt from cloud to cloud and down to earth, and every observing spirit beast felt that primordial fear. Heavenly tribulation was imprinted on their bones. Then, abruptly, an emerald column of extreme cold shot up through the lightning, cleaving a hole in the storm. The bitter cold filled the gap and spread outward, and the lightning began to fade, its crackling energy dissipating. Beneath the failing storm, Binger's form reappeared. For a moment, she gleamed like carved jade, her scorpion body translucent, her tail hook shimmering with emerald light, radiating an unbearable chill. Then the light receded, and she returned to her human shape. She rushed to Snow Empress, exclaiming, Snow Empress! I did it! Her voice trembled with joy. Snow Empress's mouth lifted in a faint smile, but she answered solemnly then. Binger, now that you've passed your 400,000-year heavenly tribulation and your strength has grown, the land of the extreme north will depend on you to guard it. Binger's joy froze in an instant. She grasped Snow Empress's arm and looked at her sharply. What do you mean? You've been acting strange ever since you returned a few days ago. What happened? Tell me. If there's a problem, we can fix it. Snow Empress's face flickered with complexity. After a beat, she told Binger what had occurred since her return, briefly, deliberately. She said she had used a snow lotus to transform, had been sealed, mentioned a bargain she'd made after waking, and how her origin had been restored. But she left out small, vital details. Some of her interactions with Kong Ming'an were omitted almost instinctively. When Snow Empress finished, Binger sat stunned for a moment, then her golden eyes filled with alarm. "That's a human? Snow Empress, are you out of your mind? No human is to be trusted. He'll trick you into helping him, and when he's strong enough, he'll kill you to take your spirit ring and spirit bone." Snow Empress shook her head, her voice steady and stubborn. "He's different from other humans." Binger stared at her, the unease in her chest deepening into a real, prickling dread. Something was definitely wrong. 77. Remarks on the launch. As the title says, on the 27th, tomorrow, I'll be posting a 10,000 character update exactly at 12 p.m. Honestly, this lazy author had hoped to wait a few more days before going live, since this timing isn't ideal. But it's already been removed from the new book list and won't get any more recommendations if I delay, so I have no choice but to launch now. First, thank you all for your support. I almost stopped writing my last book when initial subscriptions were under 100, and I started this fanfiction mostly to clear my head. I never expected so many people to read it. That was a wonderful surprise. I'd also like to thank Penglai for still believing in me and offering a contract. I really appreciate it. To show my sincerity, I'll release 10,000 characters a day for the first 2 days. Conveniently, those 2 days cover a small plot climax, a major power-up for the spell cultivator, and the protagonist's personal forging of a divine ascension ladder. After that, I'll settle into a steady schedule of 3 chapters a day, totaling about 6,000 characters daily. It's not that I don't want to post more. I'm currently a third-year university student with a lot on my plate. I need to enter some competitions to strengthen my resume, so my available writing time is limited. For my previous Dolo Dalu 2 fanfiction, I kept up a 6,000 character daily pace all the way to the end without issues, so this rhythm feels sustainable for now. Once I acclimate, I'll try to level up to an 8,000 character pace, and maybe one day push for 10,000 every day. Finally, I hope you'll continue to support me. Please subscribe to the first chapter. That's all. Chapter 78, Unraveling the Loop. Different? How is he different? The Ice Empress snorted, her scorpion tail coiling behind her. They're all despicable, shameless creatures. What could he possibly have given? She cut off mid-sentence when the Snow Empress, with a casual flip of her wrist, produced more than 20 10,000-year mystic ice marrows. The energy they gave off was faint but exquisitely pure, and the light they shed was almost blinding. The Ice Empress blinked. Her insult died on her lips. Her golden eyes sharpened. Instinctively, she reached out and touched one of the marrows, feeling the absolute, unadulterated cold within. Disbelief flickered across her face as she looked back at the Snow Empress for confirmation. The Snow Empress gave a slight nod. Her expression was calm, but her voice grew serious. "Do you understand now? He truly is not like other humans." The Ice Empress stared at the pile of mystic ice marrows, then at the Snow Empress's grave face. She gritted her teeth, still incredulous. How could a human be so generous? There had to be a hidden motive. Standing up, eyes alight with stubborn resolve, she said, "I don't believe it. Unless I see this for myself. Snow Empress, take me with you. I want to see what kind of bewitching potion this human has given you." The Snow Empress had already explained clearly, hadn't she? Why did the Ice Empress insist on coming? A strange possibility intruded on the Snow Empress's calm. Could this too be part of his plan? She thought for a long moment, then sighed and spoke seriously. "Very well, but when the time comes, Binger, you must not attack him, and you must not harm him in any way. Do you understand?" "What if he tries to hurt me?" the Ice Empress demanded, defiant. "He won't harm you, but he might make a move on you," the Snow Empress said, lips tightening as she left the rest unsaid. After another pause, she added, "I cannot describe what he looks like. You'll understand when you see him. Now, Binger, be my protector." The Ice Empress froze. "Protector? Yes," the Snow Empress replied softly. "I must undergo my tribulation, my 700,000-year heavenly tribulation." That was one of the young man's instructions to her. Compared with other places, undergoing the tribulation in the land of the extreme north would essentially guarantee success. He did not want anything to go wrong. A faint smile flickered across the Snow Empress's clear, cold features as she resolved herself. Ming City, deep within the Hall of Worship's laboratory. In a cold, forbidden array, a hunchbacked, ferocious-looking evil spirit master flailed and begged, eyes bloodshot and insane. My lord, please, let me go. I'm innocent. They forced me, please." Having watched several of his colleagues die slow, methodical deaths, the man's psyche had completely ruptured. Kong Ming'an paid his pleas no mind. His gaze was calm, almost impatient. He made a mental note. When confirming something was material in future, he might first remove its tongue. It would make subsequent processing easier. He raised his mental force and patted the confiscated 10,000 soul banner. It moved without a breeze. A hazy gray beam of light shot out and plunged into the evil spirit master's body, extracting his soul and drawing it into the banner. The begging stopped as if a switch had been cut. Kong Ming'an extended ghostly blue threads, a woven mix of mental force and spirit power, refined from Elder Yi's methods for controlling the undead. They took the place of the master's soul, temporarily animating the still living body. The man stiffened and rose like a puppet on strings. At Kong Ming'an's feet, 7 spirit rings materialized under his control, 2 yellow, 3 purple, and 2 black. The master's own chaotic, malevolent spirit power spilled out and hung in the air. Using his thought to command the body, Kong Ming'an activated the martial soul true body. The creature howled, "Awoo!" The body swelled and twisted, reshaping into a towering, terrifying wolf with dark red fur and blood-hungry eyes that glowed with a murderous light. A sharp scent of blood and evil aura filled the room. The bloodthirsty soul wolf spirit grows by devouring flesh and souls. It was an undeniably evil martial spirit. To have reached spirit saint level, its master could not have been as innocent as he'd cried. Kong Ming'an observed clinically. A pale blue luster crystallized over him as he entered an elementalization state. The extreme cold aura spread like a halo. He condensed ultimate ice into a tiny, exquisitely owned scalpel in his hand. In an instant, the ice crystal blurred into slivers of cold light, so fast they were almost invisible, beginning to dissect precisely along the energy structure and meridians of the martial soul true body. The faint sizzling of ice blades cutting through energy echoed in the laboratory. Moments later, the wolf's body was covered in countless minute, perfectly straight ice blue furrows, as if measured and carved by the most precise instruments, an energy level pattern of Ling Qi, 1,000 cuts likeness. Yet under Kong Ming'an's mental threads and the maintained energy weave, the martial soul true body retained a bizarre animation. A glint of satisfaction passed through Kong Ming'an's eyes. It's basically similar to previous findings. The martial soul true body and elementalization, as well as qi and blood transformation, share commonalities. There may be a way to combine them. He noted the discovery silently and moved to the next phase. The dissection had been incidental. It was not the experiment's purpose. He let his fingers curl and the ghostly blue threads quiver. Immediately, the spirit power within the master's body began to interact with the spirit rings in a new way. This was not a violent ring explosion that shattered rings to release energy. It was a subtler technique, one that unbound the rings from the energy they contained and let the vast spirit power stored within them flow back into the master's body in an orderly, controlled manner, like opening floodgates. Kong Ming'an had developed a gentler analog to ring explosion. He called it ring dissolution. 79. Where did my bounty go? A massive, chaotic influx of spirit power with multiple attributes surged into the meridians, fusing with the resentful, blood-tainted mixed spirit energy of the evil spirit master and immediately triggering a violent reaction. The evil spirit master's body trembled and suddenly expanded, his meridians and bones crushed little by little beneath the overwhelming spirit power, his body cracking inch by inch. Kong Ming'an paid it no mind. After all, this was a one-time consumable meant to be used to the fullest. Dark blue threads began to forcibly guide the liquid spirit power within the evil spirit master, compressing it gradually from liquid to solid and setting it to rotate. The mass started to autonomously absorb and purify surrounding energy. Clearly, Kong Ming'an was attempting to condense a soul core. For most spirit masters, condensing a soul core is a perilous, delicate process. A single structural flaw can make the core explode, leaving no corpse behind. For Kong Ming'an, however, the process carried little real risk. None of the spirit power constructs he created could ever truly lose control. He gave a gentle push. The solidified spirit power rotated steadily under his manipulation. He poured everything the evil spirit master had into the process, the victim's lingering spirit power, the mental force remaining after his soul had been extracted by the 10,000 souls banner, the enormous force released when his rings were loosed, even the energy used to construct his martial soul true body. All of it became fuel for the soul core, accelerating the condensation. After an uncertain interval, the compressed, rapidly rotating energy mass reached a critical point and suddenly collapsed inward. Its light retreated and stilled until stability returned. A tiny crystal, barely the size of a fingernail, roughly a quarter the size of a normal May, titled Dulo's soul core, floated where the evil spirit master had stood. It glowed with a bizarre interweaving of colors. The soul core had formed. Kong Ming'an dispelled his elemental form and relaxed slightly, a hint of fatigue in his brow. He reached out with a palm wrapped in neutral, pure spirit power and gently picked up the newly formed core. A faint blue light flickered in his eyes as he inspected it, brows tightening. "The structure is fine," he murmured, "but the essence is mixed and impure. The energy is hard to mobilize, and there are hidden dangers. Most importantly, the improvement in quality is similar to the previous attempts. Does a single soul core have an upper limit on how much it can improve spirit power quality? Without a baseline for comparison, it's hard to be certain, but at least it can't assimilate and unify different types of energy. A failed product." He shook his head, sealed the tiny, flawed core, and tossed it onto the failed product display shelf. Several similar containers were already lined up there, each holding soul cores of different sizes and colors. He rubbed his temples and glanced at the now empty materials shelf beside him, but he had no intention of continuing research for the moment. Not far away, Miss Meng was slumped over the workbench, asleep. Kong Ming'an paused, then walked over. His footsteps were soft. Meng Hongchen's eyelashes fluttered as if she sensed him, and she sat up with a yawn. "Finished?" she asked. "Yes, just finished." He came to her side. Meng rubbed her sleepy eyes, then simply leaned against him. She wrapped her arms around him and nuzzled her head to his shoulder, voice thick with drowsiness. "Still a bit sleepy. Let me hug you a little longer." She closed her eyes again. Kong Ming'an said nothing. He picked her up and carried her to the sofa in the resting area. He lay down first, then settled her in his arms. Sensing the change, Meng didn't open her eyes. She fumbled a bit and then found a comfortable position, curling into him, and resumed sleeping. Kong Ming'an remained quiet, holding her gently and watching. Though she wore the moon-white uniform of the Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy, the fitted cut outlined the young girl's soft curves. White stockings covered her legs, and the whole look was bright and innocent. As she slept, she seemed even more endearing, beautiful and hard to look away from. Miss Meng had come to help with experiments out of concern. Being in the lab day after day could be dangerous. But she wasn't a spirit beast like the Snow Empress, who could do without sleep for decades. She was a human with only modest cultivation. After several consecutive days, drowsiness finally overcame her. Watching her sleeping face, Kong Ming'an felt a wave of mental force fatigue himself. He hadn't reached any inhuman realm yet. Continuous research for a month or two still weighed heavily on him. So he adjusted his posture, held Meng close, and let himself fall asleep for a few hours. Later, at the dining table in the resting area, Miss Meng was fully awake and in a cheerful mood. She pushed a plate of food toward Kong Ming'an and sat down beside him. "Was the experiment successful?" she asked. "It succeeded," he said softly. "The basic objective was achieved, but there are issues with the extended results. Also, a lot of materials were delivered to my doorstep recently. It felt wasteful not to use them, so I got a little carried away." Since he had led the Sun Moon team to win the Spirit Master tournament, many factions had taken notice. Probes and inquiries increased from various countries and organizations. That was manageable, only information gathering. The real change came when someone put a bounty on him, and the amount was not small. That drew a flood of desperados trying to strike him. The evil spirit masters of the Holy Spirit Church were among the most frequent attackers. They didn't give him much trouble directly, but they made his experimental materials warehouse unusually rich. Of course, some assassins discovered they vanished without a trace if they came after him. Several titled Duluo who attempted it simply disappeared. Those bizarre outcomes made others cautious, and the number of attempted assassinations dropped to a fraction of what it had been a month earlier, much to Kong Ming'an's private disappointment. Others would be restless and unable to sleep if they knew they had a bounty on their head, Miss Meng grumbled, chin in her hand, watching him. Only you still have the leisure to feel regret. I asked Sister Juzi to investigate who placed the bounty, she continued, eyes bright. Guess who it was? Shrek, Kong Ming'an answered without thinking. Tsk. Miss Meng clicked her tongue, a little annoyed. Did Sister Juzi tell you? Just a guess. He couldn't help smiling at her expression. Shrek, or rather some people within Shrek, are obsessed with the glory of Shrek. I personally destroyed their signboard. They probably wish they could tear me apart. They wouldn't show it directly, though. They'd likely put a bounty on me using the excuse that this child is from Sun Moon. He'll be a great threat in the future and must not be allowed to live. You seem to know Shrek well, Meng said, then shifted. But you definitely won't guess who withdrew your bounty. My bounty was withdrawn? Kong Ming'an's eyes sharpened inwardly. Don't withdraw it, then there won't be any materials delivered to my doorstep. For a moment his mind dwelt on the practical loss rather than the social implication. Then, seeing Miss Meng's amused look, he became serious. So who withdrew it? Meng gave him an irritated look, snorted, and answered, Your clan sister, Zhang Lexuan. 80, Miss Dragon King. I'm going to squeeze every last drop of value out of him. Her? Kong Ming'an's mind drifted back to a memory of Zhang Lexuan leaning against him a few months ago. Oh, your clan sister's been quite the celebrity at Shrek these past months, Miss Meng said, amusement tinting her voice as she chose her words carefully. I heard that when the Shrek representative team returned, a crowd of Shrek students swarmed them, asking why they lost, why they didn't defend Shrek's honor. Some team members couldn't help themselves and snapped back. Tempers flared, accusations were hurled, and then a girl whose spirit is an evil fire phoenix started fighting outright. She injured more than 10 people in one go. Miss Meng's tone cooled. The dean of the spirit department had to step in to suppress the matter. But within a month, 4 of the Shrek 7 devils applied for early graduation. 2 returned to their sects and families, and the other 2 were directly recruited by the Star Luo Empire. That looked like desertion to the other Shrek students, and their anger naturally turned to the remaining 3. Kong Ming'an put the pieces together. He was curious. And then, Shrek covered it up, Miss Meng said. It wasn't something to boast about, but your clan sister didn't just sit back. She kept digging into the rot inside Shrek, even though she didn't have official power to enforce anything. She paused, then continued. She found evidence that several elders put a bounty on you. She took that evidence to them and confronted them. She made them take the bounty down to avoid the scandal spreading. They didn't want people saying Shrek can't take a loss. Kong Ming'an's face flickered with a trace of regret. Strange, he mused, that he felt sorry the bounty had been removed. Not because he wanted it back, but because he had been willing to let it stay. Their casual conversation wound down. He had finished his meal. He rose slowly and glanced at Meng Hongqin. Shall we? Next is checking your control over the soul skill module, right? They left the lab. The materials were used up for now. Kong Ming'an enjoyed experiments and the satisfaction of results, but he couldn't live in the lab all the time. He checked Miss Meng's soul skill module, then wandered the academy grounds for a while. Far outside Ming City, 2 figures appeared on the outskirts. Ming City, capital of the Sun Moon Empire and the continent's hub for cutting-edge soul tool technology, had no city walls. From a distance, the city spread in every direction, orderly lines of buildings and wide, intersecting roads. If one paid attention, countless spirit tool arrays were visible, woven together to enclose the city, sending out immense fluctuations of spirit power. Interesting. The silver-haired girl's vast, concealed mental force swept over the city. Her purple eyes held a flash of interest. She had to admit, humans never failed to surprise her. From the Stardew Great Forest to here, the closer she came to Ming City, the more dramatic the changes, and it stunned her. In the few times she had slept, tens of thousands of years had passed. Humanity had advanced so far, it had spawned multiple gods. Now another god might be on the verge of being born. Humans, she murmured, thoughtful. A golden figure leapt forward and interrupted her reverie with barely contained excitement. Lord Sister, is this where we're going? It's huge. It feels different from other cities. The golden-haired girl's voice was bright, full of boundless energy. The silver-haired one regarded her for a moment. There was a faint resemblance between them around the brows and eyes. She couldn't stay annoyed. After a pause, she asked, "Can you still sense the aura of that child of destiny?" "Yes." The golden girl nodded, reached out with her senses, and pointed toward the sprawling city. Roughly that direction. The silver-haired girl understood. A child of destiny's luck was granted by the plane at birth and stayed bound to them. The luck in the Emperor, auspicious beast, had been taken, but that beast's innate talent included the ability to perceive its own luck. Even though the luck had left her, she could still perceive where that luck, now attached to the newborn child of destiny, had gone. That was how they had traveled from the Stardew Great Forest, pausing along the way, until they reached Ming City. She moved a step forward. Faint silver light shimmered in her purple eyes. An intuition tightened in her chest. This newborn would be key to the plane's desperate future, and the spirit beast's fate would be bound up in it. If the spirit beasts didn't act, they might be left behind. "Prepare, Chuer." "Huh?" The golden-haired girl blinked, clear-eyed. "Prepare for admission." The silver-haired girl's voice was soft. A brilliant silver radiance wrapped her body as her form began to shift. Her silver hair and purple eyes dulled into ordinary black hair and black eyes. Her statuesque curves softened into ordinary symmetrical proportions. The cold, striking beauty of her face relaxed into a delicate, unremarkable one. Her temperament remained cool, but compared to the arresting form she had just shown, she now looked entirely ordinary. Her black eyes were calm and indifferent. Her plan had been straightforward. Find this child of destiny, discover why the plane risked so much on him, approach him, use him, and squeeze every last drop of his value to win an opportunity for the spirit beasts to rise. It was a sound plan. But on sensing a god-level aura on him from afar, she abandoned the idea of capturing him outright. Her true identity could not be exposed. If it were, the god realm would swarm them. She needed a disguise, an unremarkable identity to blend in and get close to the child of destiny. First things first, enroll.